stories. Asian stocks rise led by Japan, but US futures drop. That's after President Trump's latest tariff plan.
Another day, another tariff threat from President Trump.
Stop me if you've heard this before. New tariff threats. President Trump warns Apple, the company, that it could face a 25% tariff, and he warns the European Union it could face tariffs of up to 50%.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fueled with Prakhar. This is Prakhar. I did that again, didn't I? I introduced myself twice. Okay. It's kind of like when any GTA game started and it would say Rockstar Games presents Rockstar North production. Yeah, and that. I shouldn't, right? I should shoot myself in that. I'll do that. Okay, so this video today, why are we getting fueled, is because of Donald Trump. And no, I'm well aware that I'm reducing my chances of getting into Harvard or probably other universities thanks to Trump's international students ban, which I don't know at this point if he's even trying to hide that he's a racist. But anyway, he's an old white man, and I hate this, but I sound like a feminist Karen from US. But yeah, he is that old white man that they all didn't want, and he's now sitting at the president's seat. Yeah, so he has been giving us a lot of content to make videos on, specifically with his financial and economic decisions for the United States. And he's basically trying to run it like a company. He's actually forgetting that governments do actually have social incentives higher than profit motives. But what can we say? That's Donald Trump. So let's just get started, huh? Now, as you saw the title of the video and the very catchy thumbnail, you are pretty much aware what we're going to discuss about, which is tariffs. But before we dive deep in another episode, let's just first try to find out what in the bloody hell are tariffs? Because I see a lot of people, specifically on LinkedIn, having a lot of discussions on this without having the first clue as to what the hell are these tariffs and why are they placed. And no, the sole incentive of this is not to show that US has the power or that US is the country. It's got a lot deeper meaning than that. So let's just get right into it. For tariffs, by definition, I'm going to have to take this story from India, and the year will be 1991, when LPG scheme, and not the ones that our PM does now, the liberalization, privatization, and globalization scheme that was introduced by the then finance minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, or Dr. Manmohan Singh, to be precise. What that scheme led to is the expansion of this country into becoming almost the number one smartphone market in the world, the number 2 or 3 automotive market in the world, and one of the biggest, if not the biggest, markets for the entire world to cater, considering we had somewhere around 1 billion people back then, which is now close to 1.5 billion. You should know what this is all about. But as soon as you open these floodgates, what will it do to your economy if you don't have any tariffs? Number one, it's going to destroy domestic businesses, domestic manufacturers, traders. Everybody who's been dealing in locally sourced, locally procured, locally made goods is going to be, well, out-competitioned by the outside world. And so let's consider today. Let's say there's a new company called Redcube, and they make smartphones, and they are locally made. It has got Android on it. It's made in India. It's a company by India. It all does everything locally. Suddenly, floodgates have been opened for the entire world to come and sell their products to India, which will include smartphones as well. Because, well, why not? Because today smartphones are everything. So, when the world is opened, when the floodgates are opened, companies from Japan like Sony, companies from China, which are far too plenty for me to name, companies from US like Google and Apple, all start selling their devices in our country. And what will that do? Of course, hinder the sales of a company like Redcube. Now, the government, of course, wants to protect these domestic suppliers out of the social incentive that I mentioned before, which the governments have. But there's a twofold reason, because the government is just not doing that out of their good heart, out of the goodness of their hearts solely. That's also because there will be a fiscal deficit. Yeah, I know what you're wondering. Now, what the hell is that? So let's talk about it. A fiscal deficit is, in essence, a loss-making company. Take an example of any startup you can name, or Zomato, for example. None of them are making profits because the expenses are far outweighing the incomes, and true incomes is what I mean. So don't start a debate in the comments, okay? So fiscal deficit is a huge deal for the governments. If the borrowings far exceed the revenues that the government is able to make, well, then it's not really a nice government, is it? If you're watching from Pakistan, I'm sorry. So what the government will do is impose certain import duties or import taxes or custom duties or tariffs. These tariffs will be applicable on every single product that is shipped from outside of India, that is made outside of India into our country, even if it's spare parts or a completely built unit, which is very commonly referred to as a CBU. Now, when certain taxes are imposed on these products, of course, the customer, which is us as the consumer, has to bear those costs. So you might feel like, why does the government do that? Because that doesn't appear to be a very socially appropriate thing to do. What you're missing out on is if it doesn't do that, we're going to be in a much bigger trouble. And that will be trade deficit, which we'll also cover. Don't worry. What the fiscal deficit will do for the government is, of course, fail the government as a whole. For example, can you guess how much for the year 25-26? How much is the expected import duty collection for the government of India? Just take a wild guess. It's somewhere around 2.5 trillion rupees, which turns out to be around $30 billion. That's billion with a B. Or for those of you, my folks, I'll tell you that's about 2.5 lakh crores. Yeah. Other than the already high taxes and GST that we pay, the government also gets a lot of money from import duties and customs. But I kind of am the only person who I know who's actually in support of these, because that will boost our domestic manufacturing, which indeed helps our economy, which indeed helps in employment, which indeed helps in, well, job creation, helps in these startups to finally start making some money for the investors. The investors start pulling that money back into the markets, and the economy booms. The money stays. Fiscal deficit is reduced for the government, which it never had. Basically, we are quite a rich country. And the trade deficit, well, that needs to reduce, and that will reduce significantly if this is allowed. So when a tariff / custom / import duty is actually imposed on a product from any product which is coming from outside of the Indian seashore or the Indian boundaries, it actually will have an implication on the consumer, because this is an indirect tax. Indirect tax, the basic definition, by definition, states that the consumer will always have the bearing of it. Let's take an example. If an iPhone costs 100 rupees to make, the iPhone will be selling for $100 plus VAT in the US. Let's say the VAT is 5%, that'll be 100 plus 5, 105. When it comes to India, the custom duty and import duty for a completely built unit will be far more. That'll be around 30%. The iPhone would already be a little bit more expensive because it's being made in the US, or let's say in another country where manufacturing costs are significantly higher than India. So the iPhone in itself is $100 plus $30 of import duty plus any countervailing duties or any other custom duties, which you will find out if you read the customs law. Then the iPhone would cost $150 in India. That will deter the customers from buying that product and to shift towards the domestic company, RedCube. The RedCube product would cost maybe $80 because firstly, it's made in India. So it's a far cheaper way to make products in India because manufacturing here is indeed cheap. It's so cheap, in fact, that when Donald Trump has tried to warn or threaten Apple, specifically iPhones, for 25% tariffs on any iPhones that will be made in India, it would still be far more expensive to make it in the US without the tariffs than to make it in India and include the tariffs. That's not just Instagram memes anymore, boys. It is true. Boys and girls, I'm sorry, I'm cancelled, isn't it? So now that you've understood the social welfare propaganda, So now that you've understood that the government works for the social welfare of domestic manufacturers and domestic companies more, they also give them what? These domestic manufacturers are the ones that are going to help the government indeed with trade deficits, which is the term we discussed before, and let's discuss it. See, trade deficits are when your imports are far outweighing your exports. what that will do is dissolve your currency, which is the rupee, dissolve any home currency, because our exports are not matching to our imports. That means we have to pay more in foreign currency than we can get more of the foreign currency. That has a negative impact on the home currency. And that is a big problem for lots of governments. And if you've followed our rupee, it has been, well, it's been kind of... So, to sum it up, a tariff, I don't know if it'll appear here, I'm not that good of an editor, but a tariff basically means something which is imposed to protect the domestic supply, the domestic market of a country, plus reduce the trade deficit of a country, targeting to give more exports than imports. And the collections will help the government with their fiscal deficit, if any. Now, there's one more thing that you must be wondering. What if Apple starts making the products in India instead of bringing them in from abroad? Well, even if you're bringing in some spare parts from abroad, that also has import duty. That also has some duties imposed on them. What the US is trying to do now is, well, very late starting to realize that they don't have much manufacturing, and their manufacturing is controlled by Southeast Asia, basically by two countries, which is China and India, and now Vietnam as well. And they want to take control of that, but Trump's real reason is not this, because looking at him, it doesn't feel like he can think that far ahead. Considering his life now, like the age, I don't think he should also, but what I think his aspect is that US is the greatest, US is number one, US. That's why he's imposing them, to show that US has the strength. But you know what he did? He imposed the tariffs on 10th April. And when China was hit with like a huge number of tariffs, and China reacted by imposing tariffs on the US, which is funny because China rarely gets anything from the US other than loans. And Donald Trump actually, his government actually exempted the HSN 8471, which includes PC parts, PCs, components, mobiles, anything, which is 80 to 90% of what China actually was exporting to the US. They were exempt from the tariffs. So that was just for show. Of course, that exemption got revoked later on, and now he's planning to impose a specific tariff on a specific company's specific product, which is unheard of because it usually is for a specific HSN. It is never for like a specific company. It can't be, because these harmonized system of nomenclature, which is the HSN code, is equal across the globe. The HSN that we use in our import duties, which is 8471 for these PC parts, PC components, PCs, is the same in the US as well, because that is exactly the consortium of the world, the biggest countries of the world who have come together to form these harmonized systems of nomenclatures. Sorry for repeating. But yeah, it's unheard of. And Apple, well, being Apple, controlling what they do, having what they have to say, having the money that they have, I highly doubt that Apple is going to respond by shifting the entire manufacturing facility in the US, because that would be financially and business-wise the worst decision that you can take, by setting up a manufacturing plant in the US for smartphones. Considering how expensive the labor is, how expensive the tooling will be, and just how expensive the US is in its entirety for setting up a manufacturing facility. It'll cost them maybe 10 times of what it will for a country like India or China that they've already done. So, yeah. Oh, by the way, and now that the US, China have reached their... It's no longer a worry for the US or Apple to do anything from China. The only worry is that Apple wants to shift to India. So does Google. And Trump is not really liking this. He also kind of didn't like Vivek Ramaswamy and has had certain specific things to say about us. So again, going back to my main point, he's not even trying to hide he's a racist now. But it's okay. I was a supporter back when Eminem wasn't, and I'm a huge fan of Eminem. And now I see what he saw, and I respect him. Thank you for watching, everyone. And this was a short explainer video. We'll catch up in a deep dive later on. Hope you liked it. If you did, I'm not going to beg. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Sorry. The sponsors are going to kill me. This video was sponsored by you guys, you subscribers. You watch it, I make more. You don't, I won't. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.